welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis session with us. Here we shall be looking at important news articles that have been highlighted in today's The Hindu Newspaper, the Delhi edition. So we are talking about 30th May 24. So quickly let's analyze three articles which are descriptive. They need a detailed analysis for UPSC Mains, and these range from what all is going on in India's tech and research ecosystem. Do we need to empower Indian researchers more by providing them better access to research material, a more open access to resources? That's what the article critically sees. The next article for mains has done quite a brief critical appreciation, of the AMRUT scheme. Now, we know that back in 2015, the government of India had created a very ambitious vision. That was when the JNNURM, one of the largest of its own kind scheme for urban renewal, was coming to the end, and instead, in its place, we had around 6 schemes that replaced it. So AMRUT, being one of those, was all about envisaging a better urban structure for all Indian cities, for most Indian cities. So has the scheme been successful? What are the shortfalls? Where have we lagged? That's what this article talks about from page 8. And the last article, for a detailed analysis, throws light on a very interesting scientific development. It says that today we are living in a world which is characterized by unknown bugs, ranging from viral to bacterial to various kind of pathogens that are creating unknown yet grave diseases. So here the scientists are coming up with another methodology to track viral infections, and you never know tomorrow this methodology. If it becomes successful, if it's backed by funding, it could mean better understanding of viral infections, timely cure, and hence reducing mortality rate. With this, we proceed with 2 quick articles for the prelims. One comes as a piece of relief to most of the southern Indian states which have battled unprecedented heat wave this summer. So therefore, the southwest monsoon is here. There are 3 parameters which enable meteorologists to predict whether monsoon is coming soon or whether it is lagging behind. So 2 of these parameters have already been completed, and scientists are assuring that within 3 days from now, Kerala may have its first heavy southwest monsoonal showers. So a quick analysis on that. Also at the same time, while this monsoon, the monsoon of this season, is arriving, the pre-monsoon period was characterized by unusual weather changes. What do they point out to? That's what we see here. And the next article here is page 10. It talks about citizenship. We know that under the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, where many people from Hindu minority who are living outside India, particularly in the countries of Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, have been promised citizenship to protect them from persecution. So many more people have been granted this right today. We will look into that. And now we start with the very first article. This corresponds to your GS Paper 3 Science and Technology. The article is page 7 and it titles Open Access is Crucial for Self-Reliance in Science. Even before we start looking at this article in detail, it's important to remember that the whole article is built around the edifice, the base of a very important initiative that the Indian government has taken recently. This is known as iSTEM. Now, STEM is familiar to most of us. STEM means a kind of academic education, a kind of skill development in fields across science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In fact, when we talk about the poor quality of Indian labor, when we say that we do have massive amount of labor, we are a young population, but many of these people are not employable in the global market. That's because there is a skill gap. In fact, the high degree of structural vulnerable unemployments in India is pretty much attributed to poor STEM skills. Even when we talk about the low female labor force participation, we point out to the same gap. There is definitely a deficit of STEM education. So here with this initiative called iSTEM, the Indian government has created an empowering step towards providing much better research and innovation ecosystem in many of public funded institutions in India. How will this help? Definitely this will help in boosting innovation. When innovation, research and development are boosted, it leads to not just better skilled workforce, it also leads to higher entrepreneurship. Hence a very ambitious program. Right? So let's always remember the I step. And now having a look at the article step by step, the article highlights the problem that although today India is becoming one of the largest of its kind developing economy, soon to be the third largest economy, beating most of the high-rated global economies by 2027. In fact, when we talk about research output and research development, we see that according to a research done by Nature Index, India was ranked third globally. This is again a very promising piece of news, which means not only are we conducting research in public funded institutions of higher learning, but also the entire ecosystem of research means that today India is not behind when it comes to newer developments in pharmaceuticals, whether it be science or whether it be any, say, applied concepts of science, technology. However, there is a problem. The article also highlights that there are some challenges that are going on, such as we lack the kind of robust infrastructure and resources that would enable a quality research. Why? Because if we talk about ease of doing science, today one of the biggest problem that our Indian scientists, young scientists, students and researchers are facing is that, one, it is very difficult for them to patent their research work, because we are living in a world of monopoly and oligopoly. By this we mean that in the academics, most of the science projects, papers, research papers, they are all patented and copyrighted by Western research institutes. Here we can talk about US, we can talk about UK, other European countries. These have had traditionally a monopoly over science and innovation. So now today, as Indian universities and research centers are publishing key developments, key breakthroughs, it's difficult for them to have them copyrighted. Another issue that is really a problem is that in India, although the number of universities has risen tremendously from 760 to 1113, that's more than 1,000, more than 1,100 just between 2014 to 21, these universities are lacking essential instrumental access and sophisticated laboratories. So where will this innovation take place? Again, this points out to why there is so much brain drain in academia. We often complain that students in India, after completing their undergrad, they swiftly move off to foreign specialized universities, whether it be Columbia or Massachusetts, Harvard. The reason for this academic brain drain also is attributed to poor infrastructure of research in India. When they get lesser facilities, then they do not want to waste their ideas. They do not want to waste their skills on poor quality labs and lack of well-funded, you can say, instruments to carry on this research. So that is one problem of lack of research and innovation in India. Another problem is that while iSTEM is trying to bridge this gap by making sure that all publicly funded research facilities across India are now all available under one portal. So what iSTEM is really trying to do is that whatever research work and innovation research papers have been produced in Indian universities, all of them will be copyrighted in the name of the owner, the researcher, and they will all be publicly available in one portal. This not only leads to better patenting of your work, it also enables many more young aspiring scientists to have access to this work. This would enable more research in the future. So these things are happening, but yet there is a problem of demand supply. That mismatch is continuing because today we need a one nation, one subscription, ONOS, which means that not only do we have an open, easily accessible subscription to scientific papers and journals, we need to make them universally available within the country. Not just to government institutes, but also to government-funded private institutes on a paid basis, even to the private institutes. Only then can we have a larger ecosystem of research. If all these are not accessible to young aspiring science students, then it becomes a big obstacle in their own learning. Then at the same time, it is also sometimes very expensive if Indian students and young aspiring scientists, if they subscribe foreign portals, if they try to purchase these articles for reading, for understanding, analyzing from foreign research institutes or universities, it costs them a fortune. Therefore, institutions in India are annually spending more than 1,500 rupees in crores to access these generals and databases. They are heavily protected databases. So in that case, what could be the best solution? We cannot access foreign journals and scientific research for free. That's not possible. Of course, also we need to provide this in India. Second thing is we need to create an ecosystem where all universities in India have to provide state-of-the-art infrastructure for these people to encourage them to readily adopt science and STEM disciplines. So what's the solution? One solution could be that please facilitate access to scientific literature through an ONOS subscription, a single one-place subscription which is available at a very affordable rate to all people in India, all scientists in India. Second thing is that much larger articles today. Now, another very interesting paradox is coming up. Although when you provide science works and journals at a cheaper rate through the ONOS portal, yes, many people will be benefited. But then here comes a paradox. Now, since the last 2 years, more specifically from 2019, many universities like even Harvard and universities based in, other countries of Europe, they are now providing some of this work also for free. Of course, the one that is readily shared, which the owners or the researchers are agreeing that it can be shared, outside the patenting, that's easily being provided now online. Many articles can be accessed. So then again, there is a paradox that will spending so much money on ONOS make sense? Because even if half of the work is available for free today to everybody online, then how much should the government spend on ONOS? Then how to specifically target the work that is not accessible and have an access to that? Could it be done with foreign collaboration? Could it be done with more investigation into how to promote this kind of access to the hidden material? These are certain questions which are an obstacle in this path. Also, there are many countries today like US, European Union, who are readily giving open accessibility to all public funded research articles by 2025. That's an announcement they've made, that by 2025, most of our publicly funded research projects, we shall be providing them online. So in this case, it is a dilemma for a country like India. If it is accessible, then whether to spend on ONOS. And if you do not spend on ONOS, and what if a major part of the work is not released? In the name of releasing, only superficial and partial work is released. Then will Indian scientists and researchers suffer in the process? Will they miss out on the key components? So these are certain questions that the article is posing here. The article is also saying that there are some challenges which pertain to long-term access. Today, the countries of US and many others such from EU, they are saying that by 2025, we shall provide you with free access to our public funded research material. But then sometimes they publish it online and then they remove it. It is absolutely their right to publish it, and sometimes they just withdraw those articles. Then what happens to Indian researchers and researchers from other developing countries? They expect the access to be there for a long time, and then suddenly it goes off. So this again means a discontinuation of their own work. It is very disillusioning for our scientists. So despite being digitally available, many articles vanish sometimes. Sometimes due to inadequate preservation efforts, also these articles recede. It's very difficult to track and find them. So therefore, today there is a new demand. The demand is coming from the young scientists, the young academic workers. They are saying that please provide a green open access. Now this is a symbolic name. This is a name where all the articles written, researched by Indian scientists and which are funded by citizens of India. Through taxpayer money, these are being funded. They should be archived in a one systematic place which is preserved for the long time, and it is public funded OA repository. So any scientist, any university can have an easy access to this. Of course, it is only Indian work. This will not only preserve, this will make accessibility very easy, and therefore it will also promote more originality, Most of the times when you take help from foreign research work, there is always a risk of plagiarism. There is always a risk of copying and borrowing ideas. It could kill originality. So creating a green open access purely Indian research work to be accessible to all Indian scientists across India, universities, private institutes, could promote a very indigenous model of research. This could be more original than the Western model. The editorial also here criticizes the pure domination of Western academic circles when it comes to publishing market. Sometimes even if the work is brilliant, it's difficult for scientists from India and other developing countries to get them published through the best of publishing houses. Because best publishing houses are not only very, very pricey, but also they are a monopoly of Western researchers. So that's again one problem. This also highlights the academic gap between the global north and the global south. So tomorrow, if India tries for creating originality, self-reliance, self-sufficiency to options such as green open access projects, creating one single database which is purely Indian, always available, funded by India's money, and promoting young people to learn from, then probably we could not just make research more affordable for many Indians, we could also make sure that we are striving towards originality. We are being very independent and we are promoting indigenous research. Also because most of the problems are very, very regional in nature. Most of these innovations are applicable to one country at a specific time. Say for example, tomorrow if a research is done on a disease, on a particular kind of virus, or if a scientist was to do a breakthrough research in, say for example, cholera, or for example the KFD disease, that's a very, very epidemic nature disease. It's restricted to one area of India. So in that case, originality works any day better than borrowing from other countries and their research work. So these things the article is highlighting. The article also says that today if India is ready to create a low-cost, accessible digital technology and excellent infrastructure in India's institutions, probably India will lead the path of what? Of bridging the gap between the global north and the global south. It would also mean academic empowering of the global south. Not just India, many more countries here. On that note, the next article here is page 8. It is a social issue because we are analyzing the AMRUT scheme. Let's remember the AMRUT scheme, which stands for Atal Mission for Rejuvenation. Rejuvenation means to put a fresh life into something, to kind of revive something. So here this scheme aimed at reviving, rejuvenating our urban spaces. The need was very evident because as schemes like JNNURM spoke about creating better transport, better public parks, better street lights, improving the aesthetic quality of the city, there were a lot of problems that were left behind. Biggest problem was creating green spaces. Given that today we are experiencing the urban heat island effect due to extreme heat waves, climate change of course. The problem was urban flooding, the problem was lack of adequate drinking water supply. The problem was also lack of accessibility to public transport. In most of the interior regions of urban cities, specifically suburban areas, the problem was slum hygiene. So all these problems, since they were not taken care specifically by the JNNURM and such ambitious projects, back in 2015, the government introduced 6 more urban schemes. One of that you may have heard. It was also about Awas Yojana. It was also about creating heritage cities in India, the Hriday scheme. And one of these, of course, was the AMRUT scheme, which aimed at complete urban transformation. It was launched in 2015, and interesting thing is that back in 2021, it came with a new version, just like your Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Initially, that came in 2015, but then back in 2019, it came with a new theme, Swachh Bharat 2.0. Here as well, AMRUT came in 2015 for rejuvenating urban cities, rejuvenating urban areas rather. And then back in 2021, it came with an upgraded version of itself, that's AMRUT 2.0. Why do we need schemes like AMRUT? Why does the government really have to spend so much money on reviving urban spaces? Few problems we discussed just now. Well, there are more. Because 36% of Indian population is already living in cities. And as per certain estimates by the World Bank, by 2047, it will be 50%. In fact, the World Bank also says that by 2050, majority urbanization in the whole world will happen either in Africa or in India. That is, in the South Asia, specifically India. There is young population, there is huge potential for industrialization. There is a lot of rural component still existing in these cities. We always know that in India, the major source of life and livelihood has been our villages, but now things are changing. So when we say 50% population in cities by 2047, we mean that the rate of ongoing urbanization is very, very high. Also remember that most of the times we associate urbanization with rural-urban migration. Let's remember this is just one aspect of urbanization. There is another aspect of urbanization that deals with rural-urban contiguum. Under here we mean that not just people move from rural to urban. Of course, urbanization is a movement of people, but then urbanization is also an expansion of the city. When a city from a small area expands outwards and tries to absorb the suburban areas, urban agglomerates, nearby villages, that is also referred to as urbanization. So it is a spatial process. It means urban space is increasing. It is an ongoing process. Of course, it means migration of people from rural to city. It also means expanding outwards of the main area of the city. But let's remember, in India, urbanization has not followed the standard Western model of urbanization. In most of the countries, urbanization always follows industrialization. It is the norm. In India, it is much more. Of course, industrialization has exacerbated, it has increased urbanization, but in India, it is also many more factors that come into picture. One is constant cyclic circular migration of people from city to town, town to city. Besides, Indian urbanization is also a very complex process. It's not like Western urbanization. That is a unilateral process in one direction, industry, urban, and then modern. In India, it has not been like that. In India, it has been very complex. One thing, it's ongoing. It is ongoing and a very fast-paced activity. Second thing is, in India, it has not been very systematic. It is very haphazard. Of course, it came with industrialization. A lot of people think that it came with the British, but no, we know that we started with the Harappan culture. Then, of course, the 5th, 6th century BC, Iron Age in India, second urbanization. Third, of course, was the coming of British, and then the fourth wave after 1991 LPG reforms, which led to more privatization. So in India, it has come into one wave after the other, but each one has been more complex than the other. One thing is because in India, it has not been uniform. While some states are very urbanized, some others are not. Within the same state, some areas are very urbanized, others are not. There is a lot of intrastate, interstate variation in India's urbanization. Also, it is a very haphazard process. No wonder today we are dealing with a plethora of urban problems, which includes, of course, urban flooding. Air quality is atrocious in most of the cities. There is traffic jam all the time. There is a deficiency of drinking water. The article hence analyzes the success of AMRUT scheme. That if AMRUT scheme was such an ambitious scheme and so much money was pumped into it, did we achieve much? So now the article says that the AMRUT scheme was basically launched to take care of infrastructure, which means your road, your lightning. Of course, we are talking about the physical infrastructure of the city here. Then challenges due to water, mobility. Mobility is transport and travel that is available to the citizens of a city, and of course pollution, the high grade soil, air, water pollution in the city. Of course, noise pollution is one aspect, and also the AMRUT mission aimed at improving certain key problems of urbanization like sewage management. Even the Swachh Bharat mission 2.0 also aimed at the same thing, to solve the problem of sludge, fecal sludge management, that is sewage management, segregation of wastewater from clean drinking water, also to provide for drainage of flood water, separate drains for rainwater. Right? That was the main mission. Another mission, of course, was clean sanitation, abolishing manual scavenging. Now, these related aspects were also taken care of under AMRUT. AMRUT did speak about creating green spaces or lungs in the city, which means more parks for a better absorption of carbon dioxide. AMRUT 2.0 was even more ambitious. It spoke about making cities water secure. But today, if you see, it sounds very paradoxical, isn't it? Because just now in 2024, we know that cities like Chennai, cities like Bengaluru, cities like Simla, they have had such a major drinking water crisis. The crisis was so intense that most of these cities, citizens themselves came, civil society groups came, and they took up the challenge of preserving water by kith and kin, anyhow, whatever way was possible for them. And when you talk about the fact that AMRUT 2 aimed at providing drinking water tap connections to all households in statutory towns, that are towns that are constitutionally recognized as urban places, via your 74th Amendment Act 1992, 12th schedule of your constitution. But the problem is, do all the households in statutory towns have a drinking water tap? No, the images in India say it narrates a very different story, really, that most of the statutory towns, census towns, satellite towns, let alone suburbs, deal with acute shortage of drinking water. There is practically hardly any tap water supply to every household. Also we know that in India most of the cities follow the concentric model of development. That is also something that started with the British era, that most of the commercial center of the city will be in the middle, like a nucleus, surrounded by the highly skilled workforce residential areas, and eventually the suburbs, which are surrounded by people from the lower income backgrounds and the slums. So as you move towards outward, in the outward layers of the circle, you see that basic facilities, they decline down in quality. So that's a reality today as well. So ambitious targets were created of making 100% sewage management in 500 identified AMRUT cities. Of course, there was 83,357 crore rupees that was distributed under the AMRUT scheme. The funding was utilized to provide around 58 lakh or so tap connections and 37 lakh something sewage connections. Parks were established, more than 2,500 LED. Proper lighting was provided. But at the same time, despite all these efforts and investment, there are significant challenges and gaps that are still existing. So what are these gaps as per the article? The biggest gap is insufficient, inadequate water supply. We just saw the picture. It speaks 1,000 words, really. So there is a lack of water supply. When you talk about in census and statutory towns, every home, no, that's a farce. Because let alone every home, most of the times people in the suburban areas, most of the times people in the lower income group communities, they depend on one tap per community, which also goes dry in the acute summer season. It has happened in Bengaluru all this season before the rains set in. Okay, so that's one thing. Now similarly, sanitation and hygiene, there as well. People say that in India, the research says rather, that there are more than 2 lakh deaths that take place in India, premature death, annually because of poor quality sanitation. Remember, often we hear about breaking of rotavirus infections among children. We talk about high child mortality caused by cholera, diseases like typhoid and jaundice, highly preventable, highly curable, and still leading to mortality. Why? Because it is a cycle. One-time treatment cannot assure future safety. And it happens constantly because there is a lack of separate sewage. There is a lack of clean drinking water. Of course, there is poor hygiene, poor sanitation. It also leads to maternal mortality. At the same time, India is also experiencing acute water scarcity, that we all know, with water reservoirs filled up to just 40% of their capacity. In most of the metro Indian cities, once again, namely cities like your Chennai, Bengaluru, there is an acute groundwater depletion. Where there is groundwater contamination. Now, what explains emergence of critical yet unknown diseases among most of the rural inhabitants in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, southern Madhya Pradesh, western Bihar borders? Most of these villagers are experiencing diseases such as, which are unexplainable, like more than 40% people in one particular village experiencing lung disorders, children being born abnormal, disabled, acute high grade of cancer. So this is obviously groundwater toxicity. When there is groundwater, it's unfit to be consumed or used for irrigation because it is so metallically poisoned. So these are certain realities AMRUT has not been able to take care of. Also, let's talk about the air quality. We know that the NCR seasonal, dealing with a very, very poor quality as per the air quality index that happens every year because of stubble burning or because of fog, whatever. That's just a snapshot of what is happening in larger part of India. Most of the cities, at least the bigger towns, industrialized town, more urbanized spaces, metropolitans, they experience a very, very poor quality. So we did have the National Clean Air Program in 2019, but the targets achieved are quite dismal even there. We haven't achieved much. It also corresponds with a high degree of forestation and deforestation, of course, and commercialization that also contributes here. So the article is talking about many shortcomings. It says that there is a lack of holistic planning, and the biggest problem is lack of democratic planning. Now let's remember, most of these initiatives are taken by your central government, where the states are also sharing some funding. But the state governments and the union governments working together cannot assure solving critical problems like these. What can help? What can help more? Of course, a democratic participation can help. Of course, a grassroots level awakening can help. So here, rather than completely letting these schemes get driven by bureaucratic and private interests, let's have involvement of the elected representatives of people. Indeed, we are talking about panchayat, or we are talking about, whatever your zilla parishad or your gram panchayat, whatever is available as per the ULB rules in your area, depending on population, degree of urbanization. If it is, gram panchayat, or we talk about cantonment board, whosoever are the representatives, they are the ones who need to be avidly involved in this mechanism. Otherwise, not much can be achieved. The top-down model here doesn't seem to be super successful. So let's have a more federalized model. Also, to address these challenges, the article is talking about natural organic solutions. When you impose a cosmetic makeover on your cities, by cosmetic makeover, we can say better quality bus and trams and metros, and we create good quality parks. Of course, these are important, but then these are cosmetic makeover. What really can help is an organic approach by, of course, planting more trees, by, of course, creating organic natural spaces. Now, don't just create a park. Let trees in a place be preserved. Make that into a minute forest within the city. That would enable more, because recently, I think day before yesterday, we spoke in one of our articles, we spoke about eucalyptus and how government's policy across various Indian states of putting eucalyptus in the place of indigenous native species of plants has costed tremendously to us, because it is these eucalyptus trees, which are exotic species. We spoke about Erasia trees. They don't take care of carbon sequestration. What we need is native trees. Neem tree, peepal tree, mango tree, trees like your banyan tree. These are the trees. Most of the times, they keystone species. They are the ones which assure higher carbon sequestration. So then that's something we need to think about. So people themselves participating in such initiatives could be very critical. At the same time, we need to do something for water preservation. Now, we spoke about the Sponge City mission. That is a very interesting initiative here, borrowed by China. But then creating a city into a live space. For example, rooftop gardening is a very good initiative. Rainwater preservation, creating empty basins in which rainwater gets collected. Again, a brilliant idea really. So these need to be implemented household to household, and probably only then ambitious targets like AMRUT, Hriday, JNNURM, Swachh Bharat are actually going to make a difference to the lives of people. That was the article. Next is page 11, GS paper 3 science again, and we are talking about a new discovery into virus detection. This article is talking about a research that has been undertaken jointly by the Harvard University and the Jiangsu University, and the scientists are saying that most of the times the biggest problem of combating a pandemic is to understand the nature of the virus bacteria which has caused it. Naturally, when COVID pandemic was new, the problem was less not having medication. A bigger problem was to understand the nature of virus itself. People were doing self-treatments, but all of those were conjectures. All of those were misinformed opinions. In reality, they were all guessworks. They were hit-and-trial methods, because most of the times even doctors were prescribing steroids, which later led to backlashes like, black fungus, yellow fungus, brain-eating amoeba, and all sort of critical diseases. Why? Because the nature of the disease was not understood. Many doctors were treating COVID with antibiotics, which barely made sense because it was purely a virus infection. So the reason why most people succumb to new diseases is a lack of understanding in the nature of the pathogen itself, because it takes time typically when you study a virus in a laboratory, you need to culture it. Or if you study a bacteria, you need to culture it. By virus culturing, we don't mean culturing in the bacterial sense. We mean that you need to investigate enough into it. You need to see how it mutates. For bacteria, you have to culture it in a laboratory to see the growth pattern of the bacteria. And similar things are done with various fungi, protozoa, whatever microorganism has caused the infection. It takes days, months sometimes to come with the right result, to come with the exact prediction about the mutation pattern of a new virus. And that's the reason also why COVID came with so many subvariants that most of the times even the testing kits were failing to detect whether it's COVID or whether it's something completely different. Some people went to the extent of saying that vitamin C could be the only solution because that boosts your immunity. Again, a very misunderstood fact there. Because most of the times people did not understand that immunity works by recognizing. Immunity is nothing but a body's memory pattern. If it sees something familiar, it attacks it. Something that your vaccine does for you. Okay? This is something that relates to your innate acquired immunity phenomena. So it's not true that eating a lot of supplements and, doing some kind of Ayurvedic treatment or some kind of homeopathic treatment or allopathic treatment can make you a superhuman. It doesn't work like that. And that's the reason why mortalities happened unexpectedly. So here the scientists are saying, why wait for an approach that takes months to understand the nature of a disease? And here we have something more interesting. This is known as dealing with these organisms through light. This is a very breakthrough technology. It says that today, as the world is committed to the One Health approach, why? We know it is zoonotic season going on. Most of the diseases, they come from animals, they come into humans. It becomes difficult. So better we have a One Health approach. It's a more holistic approach towards curing diseases where not just doctors but also veterinarians, also biochemists, various pharmacists, various agriculture scientists, all of these come together. They sit together, they do a brainstorming, and then they understand how these infections are mutating into different species. That's the One Health approach. In the same light, why not use light and the principles that we learnt ages before in school and college level to track and cure these viruses more easily, more quickly, and in a very pocket-friendly manner. That's the research all about. Under this research, the scientists today are now they are taking a cell, okay, and then they are infecting the cell with a virus. Some of these viruses, as per the article, were picked up from swine population, pig population, and a cell was infested. What happened? Once the virus goes into a cell, naturally it's going to create damage into the DNA structure of that cell. So now is the time when scientists take an action. They take a beam of light, okay, a sharp beam of light, and then they let it pass through the cell. What happens? When under the microscope the light is passing through this cell that is infected with the virus, the light refracts in different directions. It acts in a different direction, and this refraction enables these scientists to now understand the pattern of damage that the virus is doing, distortion that the virus is doing, and also through these light diffraction moving pattern, they also understand the nature of this virus's mutation pattern, and then they can take a quick action and probably start adequate research into preventive vaccine or into curative medicine. That's what the article says. And now this process really helps you to find out the shape, size, features of all these infected cells once the virus has been introduced. So when you can understand these dynamics naturally in a very quick span of time, which means you can detect viruses now in just about 2 hours using the light method. Whereas in the traditional conventional research, you have to wait more than 40 hours sometimes. This is a very commonplace experience. Remember, if you've ever given a sample for a bacteria culture, you know that the report will not come to you before 3 days. It's a long time taking process. Similar is true for a virus. To understand the nature of a virus also, scientists need to analyze it thoroughly. But with this light method, they are saying that rather than 2 days or 3 days, it can happen in just 2 hours. So imagine the kind of ease it will offer to patients the world over. Yes, it's a breakthrough in medical science. Also, what also happens is that in the conventional, in the older method of detecting and understanding viruses, you need a lot of chemicals to be used. It's a very lengthy procedure, but the light method is much cheaper. You don't need much inputs. Neither is it expensive, therefore. It's cheap, it's easy, it's very quick. So it can help veterinarians, animal breeders who are working in animal farms to combat, detect various infections that are spreading in animals. If that can be prevented, of course, many zoonotic diseases into humans can also be protected. Similarly, a healthy livestock can be thought of in future, which would enable not just economic benefit, but also it would prevent diseases from crossing this animal species barrier and then entering the human species barrier, because now you can track the disease at a cellular level even before the animal concerned or the human concerned experiences difficult symptoms, and then it's difficult to cure. So overall, the development of this method is a huge advancement, and if it becomes commonplace, if it is accepted universally, I think that's going to do a miracle in terms of how we treat, track, and roll out prevention for various diseases. Now, the next article is a short one, page 10, GS2 polity. It says that citizenship has now been given to many, many more citizens spanning across 3 states. We talk about Uttarakhand, we talk about Haryana, and we talk about West Bengal here. So these people have been given citizenship under the new Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 provisions, where Hindu minority population living in countries like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan shall be given citizenship rights upon entering India. And as per the Amendment Act, beyond a certain date as decided by the government, these people will now not be treated as illegal immigrants, immigrants. So that's what the article says. The article says that therefore, although the exact number has not been released by the government officials, but many people again have been granted these rights just yesterday. Now, before this also, that is say about 10 or 15 days before, on 15th May, many other Hindu communities, many other Hindu groups were granted certificates under the CAA, and as of now the government is seeing 25,000 plus applications for the same demand. So the Ministry of Home Affairs is considering these demands. Also, applications have been received from various other minorities who will be given these rights, not just the Hindu minority, but also the Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, Parsi, and Christians will also be given citizenship rights if they belong to these 3 countries, as we mentioned, upon entering India, that is before 31st December 2014. Because if they are coming due to the fear of minority persecution, religious persecution, then Indian government shall give them citizenship and accommodate them. So this comes on a very happy note to certain communities who are facing a lot of discrimination and backlash. One such specific community mentioned by the article is Namasudra community in West Bengal. They were often treated as immigrants, illegal immigrants, but with this initiative, they shall be given rights, and therefore they are happy, they are in a celebratory mode, but not everybody is sharing the happiness. Of course, the West Bengal state government has criticized the central government for this move, calling it biased, and the debate goes on. And now we see the last article for the day. This is page 5, GS3 ecology. Yes, the southwest monsoon is finally here. So every year we know the academics behind it. We know the theory about the ITCZ, the intertropical convergence zone, which would move northward. Acute low pressure would attract winds laden with moisture. They are crossing your Arabian Sea, and then they just enter India. Of course, they begin from Kerala. So now is the time it is happening, and Kerala is all set to see first monsoon showers very soon. And of course, the government is saying typically we use 3 criteria. The meteorological department is using 3 criteria to predict when shall monsoon be coming. If all 3 criteria are met, which means monsoon is ready to come. Already 2 criteria have been met. One is 14 stations in Kerala are receiving showers, pre-showers. Another thing is that neighboring areas are also recording 2.5 millimeters of rainfall for 2 consecutive days. Apart from that, the outgoing long wave radiation, which is abbreviated to be OLR, this is almost 200, as per the measurement parameter. So if these criteria are being met, then we know that after a 3-month long scorching summer, Kerala probably will see monsoon showers in just a few days from now. Also, the article is highlighting an incidence of climate change. As you know, even North Indian states have already begun experiencing 45 degree plus temperature, quite high. The heat wave is immense. Yesterday we saw how it also has a bad impact over electoral turnout. Of course, it has a health ramification. So here the article says that usually Kerala would not experience such an insane, such a difficult heat wave that was experienced this season before the monsoon and the pre-monsoon showers were making their advent. So the first time Kerala experienced a heat wave that was tremendously, it was very, very scorching and unusual. The last 2 weeks also experienced record summer rainfall, which normally never happens. So you see all these variations in climate and weather situation, they do indicate to a larger problem, of course, the problem of climate change. And there is much more to be seen in future, because climate change is not going anywhere. So every year states and cities are experiencing newer kind of temperatures, newer kind of rainfall patterns. Of course, it impacts agriculture and human life. So that's what the article talks about. And now, as per the IMD forecast, the entire 4 months to come would mean inundation, heavy rain, at least respite for Kerala. So now let's jump off to the two mains question. The first question here says, discuss how the iSTEM initiative seeks to promote a more robust, a more strong, systematic research and innovation ecosystem in India. It's a 20 marks question. So you need to talk about the deficiencies in the research ecosystem like we just did, and then talk about iSTEM. What does it mean and how will it help? The second question says, discuss the objectives, aims, achievements, challenges and shortcomings, which means we need to talk about the objectives, what has been achieved and what all is yet to be achieved, talking about the AMRUT mission in India. What measures can be taken to address the identified challenges to ensure a more sustainable growth of Indian cities in the long run? Of course, you need to talk about the 2015 AMRUT mission. With what intention was it rolled out? What was the huge investment plan? Which all areas was it targeting? Of course, we need to talk about what is lagging behind. And then we come to what we discussed in the article, a more democratic, a more federalized, a more grassroots approach probably is required. Until then, until that happens, it's difficult for ambitious schemes acting in a top-to-down manner. So we need to create a bottom-to-top approach. That's what this answer needs from you. And on that note, we come to an end of this session today. Thank you so much for being with us, and see you very soon in future with more such sessions.